to the Golden State with Mates post-game live after a 118-110 disappointing loss for the Warriors against the Cleveland Cavaliers, their second loss to the Cavs in the space of a week, their second straight loss overall, obviously, after the loss to the Nuggets on Wednesday night, and their third loss in 4 games, as well with a game against the Minnesota Timberwolves tomorrow to come. With they're riding a 5-game winning streak at the moment. So that is going to be a tough one. The Warriors are going to need to bounce back. They're 6-4 now. And although things looked very optimistic and rosy coming back onto this 6-game homestand, 8 of 10 games at Chase Center, things could get away from them pretty quickly here after this loss if, with 2 games to come against the Timberwolves, who right now look like one of the best teams in the Western Conference. But put simply, in this one, you have 20 turnovers, double the amount of the Cavs. You shoot 41.1% from the floor overall. Those 2 numbers are not going to equate to a successful night, that is for sure. And I think overall, the Cavs are a fairly tough team to come up against. Their lineup and the difficulties that presents for the Warriors, and I think with the way this Golden State roster is constructed, they are just going to have some issues against very specific teams. We saw that, against the Lakers last playoffs, obviously, and even with the roster moves that they made over the offseason, I think some of the size issues and things like that weren't necessarily addressed wholeheartedly to the point where, they're going to be able to combat some of these bigger teams like the Cavs, who obviously have the likes of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen controlling the interior. And that's what we saw in this one. It's what we saw last Sunday in Cleveland. The Warriors' inability to basically get anything, around the rim, any easy baskets. And full credit to the Cavs defense in both these games for being able to basically control the Warriors offense. I thought they did, going back to last Sunday's game, they did a really good job of limiting Steph Curry's shot attempts. And I thought in this one, Steph goes for 30, but he was really forcing things a lot. And again, the matchup for the Warriors against the Cavs is just not a good one. It's as simple as that. You've got this interior size of Mobley and Allen, which defensively causes problems for the Warriors. And then on the other end, you've got the trio of Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, obviously, and Karis LeVert, who, as a trio, provide so many issues for the Warriors and their lack of perimeter defense. I think on the Cavs offensive end or the Warriors defensive end, I don't think it's actually a size issue. It's more the perimeter defense and the inability for the Warriors to stop Mitchell, Garland, LeVert from getting to the paint and either finishing themselves or dumping it off for Mobley or Allen, or, allowing second chance points off offensive rebounds for Mobley and Allen as well. So I think it's just a horrific matchup for the Warriors. It's kind of a good thing that they're in the East because, as Fitz said on the broadcast, you wouldn't want to be facing this team 4 times. So, the Warriors, the things for me, like the turnover issues, you just can't have double the turnovers. I think the points off turnovers were 32-8 in the Cavs' favor. You're just not going to win games doing that. And the lack of a secondary perimeter defender behind Gary Payton II. So GP2 plays for 11 minutes in this game, which I find a little bit bizarre because if there is one game you really need him, it is against the Cavs and against Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland. I just wonder if they're saving him a little bit for Anthony Edwards tomorrow in the Timberwolves matchup. I don't know if that's the case or not. Steve might speak about it. I don't know if he'll be asked specifically about why GP2 only played 11 minutes. But that seemed a little bit bizarre to me on why that was the case. And then on the other end as well, the Warriors' lack of a secondary scorer right now is just not tenable to be a successful team across the entirety of the season. And really, we've kind of lauded the Warriors' depth at this point, and it is true that they have multiple players who can go out and score you double digits, right? And then, of course, they have Steph, who's capable of going for 30 plus, 40 plus, basically whatever. But at some point, you also need a guy who can go and get you 20, 25 and not necessarily force Steph to have these humongous games in order to win. And, the minutes without Steph have been really good for the majority of this season. but at some point, Clay and Wiggs have got to step up. They're the two guys who you're looking at. It's like, can we get a 20-point night out of you? Well, we haven't. Like, if you went into the season and said in the first 10 games, Andrew Wiggins and Klay Thompson are going to combine for 0 20-point games, you would have thought the Warriors are probably in the same position they were last season at 3-7. So to be at 6-4 is actually, like, it's really surprising. The fact that you've got Clay and Wiggs underperforming to this level. Now, Clay had 9 in the fourth quarter, started to get going. Couldn't care less, to be honest. Like that, they were late points in the last 5-6 minutes when the game was almost dead. Like the Cavs had rebuilt that 12-point lead in the fourth quarter. So they were inconsequential points. He had 5 heading into the fourth quarter. You can't have that and expect to win. He was 2 of 11 shooting at that point. And Wiggs, well, he was efficient. I think he was 6 of 12 on the floor. Like he got a couple of nice putback dunks, but again, way too passive, I thought. He made a 3 early in the third quarter from the top of the key. That was nice, but I mean, again, just way too passive, in my opinion. His defense early on, I tweeted about it, like he just could not keep Mitchell in front of him whatsoever. I thought the Warriors' defense in the third quarter, where they limited the Cavs to, I think it was 16 points for the period or something. I thought Wiggs was, a big part of the defensive improvement there. I thought that was an improvement, but aside from that, the remaining 3 quarters were basically, the Warriors' lack of perimeter defense was evident and was allowing Mitchell and Garland just to get into the lane, get into the paint, LeVert as well, and either finish, dump off to Mobley or Allen. It's a really bad matchup, but the Warriors at some point switched through 2 games. They've given up 115, 108 case. They're going to need more than Steph on the offensive end. And the Cavs, LeVert, Mitchell, Garland, they aren't great defenders. So really, Strus it was a weird one because Strus harassed Steph quite a bit in the matchup in Cleveland, but wasn't on Steph as much, I didn't think, in this one. I didn't have to go back and check the stats kind of on how much Max Strus was actually matched up with Steph. But I would have thought that Clay and Wiggs should be able to get some mismatches here with the kind of lack of size in that Cavs backcourt. And that just didn't really seem to be the case, which is unfortunate. Like I would have thought that one of those 2 players would have been able to go for at least 18 to 20. And unfortunately, 14 for Clay, 2 of 11 shooting heading into the fourth quarter. Wiggs goes for 13. JK has 12 off the bench. And even at times, he's got to force things because there isn't enough offense out there either. And I thought this was a pretty bad Chris Paul game. His playmaking, I just didn't think was there. He had a couple of really bad turnovers when the Warriors were pushing late in that third quarter. I know he hit that patented mid-range jumper to give the Warriors the lead late in the third quarter. But I thought overall, he had that one where he was going to pull up for a mid-range. He actually went up and then saw that Mobley was basically going to erase it if he tried it, and came back down with a turnover. And then he had one on the following possession where I think he tried a one-handed wraparound pass as well. And, it's not just the turnovers, it's the live ball turnovers that allow the Cavs to get back in transition. Just thought some of the decision-making there, some of the easy baskets. The Warriors just lacked energy, right? A couple of plays in the fourth quarter where the game was still kind of, alive at some point. And, Looney had one where I think Steph hit him on the roll and he had Garland and it was just a layup at the rim and he kicked it out for a JK 3. JK misses it short and then LeVert, I think it was, got a layup in transition on the other end. And that's a 4-point turnaround because it should have been a Warrior layup and then it ends up being a Cavs layup. A couple of the and ones that Mobley got, nothing's more frustrating than, giving up easy and ones, either hack the guy and make him shoot 2 or just let him have the basket. Don't give him easy and ones, and Mobley 2 of those. And that was just, I think, typified the Warriors' lack of energy and, their lack of desire, I suppose, and motivation in this game across, all but the third quarter. And we'll go back to the second quarter again. That's going to, they got themselves ultimately back in a position where they could have won that game heading to the fourth quarter. But the energy that they had to actually put out to get back into the game after going down by 16 at halftime, Like, it is so hard. You almost have to play perfect basketball from that point in the second half to win the game, and you've got to play high energy for 24 minutes to win it. And they just couldn't do it. They did it for the third quarter. They got back in the game, but ultimately they're going to look back on that second quarter and think, again, what we were doing. The same thing happened in Cleveland last Sunday. They got outscored 28-15 in that one. The margin ended up being 11. That was the difference in the ball game. And then this one, they get outscored 38-21, give up 38 points in the second quarter. Like, that's abysmal. And at the end of the day, like, they lose that quarter by 17, they lose the game by 8. That's the difference. And so that's going to be the big thing, moving forward here is, like, you can't have these runs. Like, usually it's the Warriors that are producing these runs against other teams that are really demoralizing. And right now we've seen the Cavs in 2 games in the last week go on massive runs in the second quarter where they really dominate the game, which ultimately proves the difference in it. And, the Warriors could be sitting here with an 8-2 record or something like that, but instead they're back at 6-4 and, back in kind of the middle of the pack in the West a little bit. So that's really disappointing. And the fact that they weren't able to manage the game in a better manner in that second quarter to, yes, you might lose the quarter, but it's really about minimizing the damage. And, I look at a lot of not just basketball teams, but teams around the world in a lot of different sports. And momentum and stuff like that is like a big word, right, in sport, just in general. And to me, it's the best teams are often those ones who can minimize the damage in periods where the other team has got the momentum. Like, I look, not to try and cross sports too much here, but my AFL team, Australian Rules football team, Collingwood, we won the premiership this year. And I think most people would say, and I would definitely say, that we were the best team in the league at minimizing the damage when the momentum was against us. We would, put up a brick wall and made sure that, the other teams, a rival team couldn't go on a massive run where all of a sudden you're down by what would be the equivalent of basketball terms, 15, 20 points, right? And I just think, at sometimes you've just got to hang in there and make sure that, for the Warriors in that second quarter, can you get to being down 8-10 at halftime, 8 to 10 points at halftime rather than 16 points? Because that's obviously a lot more manageable heading into the second half. So I think that's an important thing. The Warriors has been so good at being, incredibly dynamic across the last 10 years, especially with Steph and Clay, the ability for them to put up big numbers in a short amount of time. It's Golden State that have been able to produce those massive runs to end ball games, basically, in the second, third, fourth quarter. But now, it was the Cavs in the last 2 games here who combined for 59-36 in the 2 quarters or whatever it was. Something like that anyway. No, 20. Sorry, I've lost that. 28-15, and then was it 38-21? So whatever that equals to, but it's a 30 points combined in 2 games is the differential, and it's just hard to win games like that. From a few individual standpoints, actually, let me get on to the Draymond ejection, because obviously that was a big point of the game. Controversial one, there's no doubt about that. A little bemusing at the fact that referees can go back to kind of the previous play. Now, I'm assuming from a ref perspective, they would say that it was actually just a continuation of the same play, that there was no stoppage in between or anything. So I can't remember who it was that went up for the layup and made it, I think. And then the Warriors inbounded. Like, it was all kind of in the same sequence, but again, the Warriors would argue it was actually a made basket, so the play should have ended there. And then why do you therefore get the opportunity to go back and have another look at it? I don't know. I'm sure the league will come out and kind of clarify that. But it does open up a can of worms, as Fitz was saying on the broadcast. Like, if Steph Curry all of a sudden gets cheap shotted off the ball, can the Warriors just go make a hard foul on the next possession and then say, well, if you're going to look at this play, look at the previous one as well with Steph? Like, that does open up a can of worms. Now, I'm not advocating that the Warriors should be doing that, or that any team should be doing that, but I do think that it's something that the NBA needs to kind of nip in the bud pretty quickly just to make sure, everyone knows the rules and is, on the same page, because I know from me playing social sport, there's nothing worse than when you're not actually 100% sure of what the rules are, and when there's a little bit of confusion about what's going on. And clearly there was some confusion there about what the referees were able to do in terms of being able to go back to what most would, suggest was the previous play to hand out a second technical foul to Draymond Green. The worst thing about it, I actually don't, if the refs, want to do that, that's fine. In my opinion, I actually have more of an issue with the fact that it was called a T on Draymond. Now, I actually the thing for me is I don't think it was a strong enough bump to be anything more than maybe just a common foul. Now, I don't think referees, if they miss a call, right, if there's a foul that they don't call, I don't think refs can go back and be like, well, that should have been a common foul, but we didn't call it. So now we on replay, we're going to give him a technical foul. You can't do that. So I'm just confused as to why it was a T. It may have been a common foul if they'd called that and one, I think with LeVert or Garland or whoever it was made the layup, and then they called a foul on Draymond against Mitchell, and Mitchell goes to the line for one free throw. We see that sometimes. That's fine, but I don't know what it did to be a technical foul. I'm honestly, I have no answer. I'm really confused as to why it was a T. Again, it was maybe a common foul, but then you can't also reinstate a common foul after the no call. You can't do that. So that was bemusing to me. Not necessarily going back to reviewing the play like they did, but just the fact that it was called a T was confusing to me. I thought the Warriors for a time used that as energy for a little bit. They obviously, I think they were down 9 or 10 at that point. They came back, took the lead late in the third quarter. So they actually utilized that energy within the arena, within the stadium to, build a bit of momentum back up late in that third quarter. And then, as I said, I think they just utilized all their energy in the third in trying to mount a comeback. They did mount the comeback, and then, the Cavs steadied and were too good offensively in the final period. I think they outscored the Warriors 34-27. There again, the Warriors probably were fortunate to get within 8 in the end. Again, you have 20 turnovers, you shoot 41% from the floor. Not a good recipe for success, that's for sure. And they were out by 12, 14 at some stage in the last few minutes. You had that weird ending to the game where the Cavs actually had to bring their starters back in because Porter missed 5 free throws in a row, or he missed 4, and the Warriors actually had a chance to cut it to, was it 5 or 6 at one point when the bench of both teams were on at that point. And then JB Bickerstaff had to bring the Cavs starters back in to try and close the game again, but I don't think Golden State were ever a chance of winning that game in the final minute. Nice that they were able to harass them and make it a little bit more difficult, but whatever, that doesn't really matter. I think it doesn't deter from the fact it was a pretty disappointing game from the Warriors. I think probably the most disappointing for the season, just because there are a multitude of errors. Just the fact that, who played well. I'm just not even sure who played well in this game. If you go back to, the Suns loss, opening night, you just shoot poorly from the field, whatever. The Nuggets loss the other night, I thought was a really, really good effort. And I thought, a couple of things went against them that otherwise might have meant they could have won. The Cavs lost last week, tough road schedule. That was kind of a scheduled loss to me, and the Cavs were just better. And the Cavs were just better in this one again, but they shouldn't have been better when the Warriors are back on their home floor, starting a 6-game homestand. 6-3. It feels like so much of a difference going from 7-3 to 6-4, and now you face the T-Wolves, where, as I said, they're riding a 5-game winning streak. They look like one of the best teams in the West. Anthony Edwards is, one of the best players in the league. Rudy Gobert, I think, is into favoritism for Defensive Player of the Year. So he looks like he's back to his defensive best. Looking forward to the matchup with him and Draymond, because that's always kind of a fiery battle given the defensive prowess of both players over the last decade. Jaden McDaniels is a great defender. Karl Anthony Towns got going the other night for them. So they're a really talented team. And they're going to be a hard team to beat, especially on the second night of the back-to-back, where I think they've had a couple of nights break here now to prepare for this clash against the Warriors at Chase Center. It's going to be a tough one. I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota win it. And if they do, the Warriors are back to 6-5. And you kind of think to yourself, all that good work at the start of the season, like we got to 6-2, like all that strong start is kind of for nothing. And it's really disappointing. So, I mean, it's a rough one to lose to Cleveland twice in the space of a week, but the first one I thought whatever. This one is more of a really disappointing to lose that game in the manner that they did, where the second quarter was just so disappointing, and they used up all their energy. The Draymond ejection, just a lot of things didn't go their way, and most of that was self-inflicted with the turnovers, the poor shooting. But again, credit has to go to the Cavs for their combination in terms of Mobley and Allen on the front line. Mitchell, who went big last Sunday but didn't have that big a game, but was ably supported by Garland and LeVert. Max Strus, I think, had 14, 15 points as well. So they just had an overall great team performance, and the Warriors were relying on Steph, who goes for 30, but again, just had to force things because he had no one else really supporting him. Clay, second top scorer with 14. Like, again, you're not modern basketball where teams are putting up 110 plus points basically every game. You've really got to have a second guy scoring minimum 15, 16, if not 18 to 20 points. It's so hard to rely on Steph to be doing superhuman things on every given night. And if that was to continue, if this is to continue, where the Warriors basically cannot get a genuine secondary scorer who's averaging 20 a game, like maybe there is, a chance here that they have to pull the trigger on a mid-season trade to try and get a second scorer in who's going to take the pressure off Steph. We know Chris Paul has been fantastic at taking the pressure off Steph when he's on the bench and being able to create offense for others. But I think at some point, the Warriors also need a guy that they can put the ball in their hands and say, you just go get us a bucket. Just go get us a bucket yourself. Chris Paul hasn't necessarily been that. Klay Thompson hasn't been that. And I think Andrew Wiggins, with his skill set and his size and athleticism, he should be the guy, but he just hasn't been. So it's ultimately disappointing, and it's certainly a watch moving forward. I thought Draymond played pretty well in his 18 minutes before he got ejected. 3 of 4 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3-point range. The shot actually looks really good, and again, he made both of them he made one in the first and one in the third, I think it was, before he got ejected, because he kind of, he's had some issues obviously with the three ball and with his shooting over the last 6-7 years basically, and it's starting to probably look as good as it ever has, or at least dating back to kind of that 2015 2016 period, the 73-9 season. So thought he played well. Looney had another 13 rebounds, just the 2 points though. Clay, Steph, we spoke about. GP2 spoke about 3 points, 5 rebounds, just 1 of 4 from the floor. Some of his finishing around the rim probably needs to improve a little bit, because I go back to the 21-22 season, you win the championship, and I think he shot something like 70% from the paint or something like that. Like, he was basically the best guard finisher in the league. Now, most of those were kind of, lob dunks or something like that, or just cutting baseline for a dunk, whatever. But, he missed one early in the game where he kind of rushed it a bit, just simply because of the presence of, I think it was Jared Allen at that stage. So, that's something I think he's got to work on. Saric, I thought, was pretty uneventful game for him. 5 points, 5 rebounds, 2 of 5 shooting, 0 of 3 from deep. Paul, 9 points, 3 rebounds, 9 assists. That looks all right. 3 steals as well. 4 of 7 shooting, 1 of 2 from deep. That's fine, but 3 turnovers. And I thought that a couple of those late in the third quarter, when the Warriors were looking to not just get in front, but even if they could have built a lead of 3, 4, 5 points heading to the fourth quarter, like they were really in the game. And I thought a couple of turnovers from CP3 there were disappointing. Moody has 8 points, 5 rebounds, 2 of 4, 2 of 3, made a 3 late. He was okay, steady enough without being hugely impactful. Kuminga, 12 points, 3 rebounds, just 2 of 7 shooting, got to the line on 11 occasions, so made 8, 3 rebounds, 4 fouls again for him though. I mean, they just need his. It's not great from him. It's good. It's not great, but they need his scoring. That's for sure. And yeah, I mean, he might have to just play more. Like he's 20 minutes and 39 seconds today. Like if you're not going to get anything out of Wiggins and you're not getting anything out of Clay, you need someone who can put the ball in the bucket. And JK can put the ball in the bucket. Now, yeah, he's going to have times where he goes to his fadeaway and he misses and it's inefficient. Or, he drives down the lane and he gets stripped and it's a turnover or something like that. He's going to have his errors, yes. But ultimately, he's probably one of the few players that can get to the free throw line and actually put pressure on opposition defenses on the interior. And given the lack of that in the rest of the roster and the fact that Wiggins isn't doing it right now, I think I'd just be pushing for JK to play more, particularly over this 6-game homestand. I'm going to be interested to see kind of his playing time going forward. Jackson Davis played a little bit, as did Podziemski. Joseph hit a 3 at the end. No one really cares about that. Quickly, just on Jackson Davis and Podziemski, who made their G League debuts on Friday against the Stockton Kings. TJD had 28 and 12. Podziemski had 24. They're way too good for that level. Now, I'd just be pushing for Jackson Davis to be playing more, but you've probably heard me talk about that already, so I'm not going to rehash it, but it was great to see those guys go down to the G League and just show that they are way too good for that level, particularly Jackson Davis. He had that huge highlight post dunk in the first minute of the game, had 5, 6, 7, maybe even more dunks for the game. Like, he just gets himself in great position offensively. And yeah, ultimately he should be playing more, I think, for the Warriors. It took until the final couple of minutes of the first half where both Loon and Draymond had 3 fouls before he saw game time, and then he just came back in for the garbage minutes at the end. So really he played like 2 or 3 minutes of actual legitimate playing time. I'd like that to increase. Like, Loon plays 24 minutes again. I just think I'd like that cut down to 20. Saric plays 16, 26. Probably cut a couple of minutes off that as well. I don't know. I know Steve's probably a bit concerned about playing too many young guys at the one time because we're still classifying Moody and Kuminga as young guys, but I don't know. I think TJD needs to play, and we saw he's way too good for the G League level. Going to be interesting tomorrow with obviously Cat and Gobert, how the Warriors front court kind of tries to handle that. Gobert's obviously not going to do too much offensively, but he is going to be a lob threat. And he could take advantage and capitalize from the kind of attention the Warriors are going to have to throw at Anthony Edwards, who, as I said before, is one of the best players in the league. Other than that, apologies for the bit of muck up early there on the first part of the live stream. I apologize for that. Again, I'm looking at it right here and I can tell that my audio is coming through. It wasn't on the first one. I went back and checked and it actually was coming through. Anyway, it's all very confusing. Hoping won't have any issues in the future. Won't have a post-game live tomorrow after the T-Wolves game. We're going to have a full podcast, hoping to get a guest on Monday, American time, Tuesday, my time, to recap the Warriors' loss here to the Cavs and hopefully a win over the Timberwolves tomorrow, but we'll wait and see what happens again. I think it's going to be a tough game to try and win on the second night of a back-to-back with the momentum that the Timberwolves are riding at the moment with a 5-game winning streak. Other than that, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. I'll be putting this episode up on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. You can follow me at POK252. That's POK252 on Twitter. Until next time, thank you again for tuning in.